All right, this is part 2 of my interview with Shawna Thomas. It's been awesome, and if you missed the first part, go back and watch it because it's really cool. She's awesome. All right,
Thank you.
So you were saying how the press is dealing with the not entirely true things that President Trump has said, and how you ethically report something when it's clearly demonstrably false.
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend like the press has totally figured it out. I think a lot of news organizations, there are a lot of fact checking that goes on that didn't necessarily, like public fact checking, like behind the scenes fact checking has gone on for a very long time.
Right.
But public fact checking in that, like the Pinocchios on the Washington Post and PolitiFact is a way bigger deal than I think it was 5 years ago, and that kind of thing. And so I think that's one way to do it. I think the other thing that news organizations have struggled with is like, do you actually call the president of the United States just like a bald-faced liar? Do you use that word? Or do you say untruth or false or something that doesn't feel as heavy to a certain extent? And I will say with my experience, because I left NBC News before he became president and went to Vice, I was given a little more latitude at Vice News to like call bullshit when I saw bullshit.
Right.
And I think I even have a whole piece that's just about calling bullshit and like me saying bullshit over and over again. There's a level of humor there at Vice News that other news organizations don't necessarily have. I think I not early on, but like after something just basically was like, I think I called the president a racist while I was at Vice News and doing on-air stuff. And I think there is a conversation about like, how blunt should we be?
Right.
And how do we do this still in a fair way?
Right.
Because there are certain things you may not like it, but that he can do. And I think like an example lately is the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York. You may not like how he was fired. You may not agree with it. You may think it is for fully self-serving purposes because SDNY is investigating certain things that are related to President Trump. But U.S. attorneys serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States. So you know what he can do? He can fire the guy. Right. And we can discuss what are the implications of that firing, and we can discuss what does it mean for the person who is now stepping into the role, as well as go deeper into, if you can get the information, what SCNY was investigating. But what I can't tell you is that he was not well within his position to fire that guy. And I do think it is really important to continue to make the distinctions of what the presidency means, while also still having conversations about the implications of what he does. So,
yeah, absolutely. Very cool. And so as you said, you went from NBC to Vice. You talked a little bit about the difference in culture, but what was one of the pieces that you did at Vice that you never would have done at NBC, and like that was awesome? You know what I mean?
That's a really great question. So I have a couple of answers for that. So I think the thing from that show, so I was a senior producer / DC bureau chief / correspondent for Vice News Tonight on HBO, which was on air from October of 2016 through September of 2019. So it was about 3 years before we were canceled by HBO. I'll remember that, HBO. The biggest thing we did was the Charlottesville episode, which a lot of people have seen, and I was the senior producer of. And lots of news organizations covered Charlottesville because, one, like you were like, we don't quite know what will happen, and I don't think any of us went into covering at least what we knew the plan was, thinking someone was going to die in the case of Heather Heyer, or how bad it would get there. But like there was a possibility it will get bad, and you know, cameras go. The thing that was different about Vice is, and this was a function of the fact that our show was, I think at that point we were 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So we didn't have Saturday and Sundays. We're not cable news in the same situation of like, I have to do a live talk to camera every hour for the next 10 hours for CNN or MSNBC.
Right.
So we need to go in with an idea of what our story might be. And we went in knowing we were going to do this story that surrounded this white supremacist and how he was approaching this.
Interesting.
And so what that meant for us is we went in a day before. We have that like stark footage of them with their tiki torches, saying Jews will not replace us, which when you see that footage in multiple places, it's Vice's footage. And because we were there a day before, because there was a story we wanted to tell. By the Sunday night of that, like I was not physically there, but I was like in communication with them, and I'm the one who sent the team down there, and I'm the one who helped them develop like how are we going to approach this? But we were approaching it like a 6 or 7 minute piece that may or may not come together depending on if anything happens. By that Sunday night, after most of the footage had gotten back to our offices in New York, and the editors had started working with it, the difference between Vice and NBC News is that my boss at the time, a guy named Josh Turangal, who I have learned so much from, like left his house in Manhattan, went into Brooklyn, and watched this 45-minute cut of footage that the editor had done. And after he watches it, and the producer had sent me like a script that was like 15 minutes long that I had started trying to work with from home. But Josh went in and watched that 45-minute cut that the editor did. And he calls me, and it's like 9 p.m. on Sunday night, and I'm in my kitchen. And he is like, Shawna, and I'm like, yeah, he's like, we're going to do the whole episode. We've got it. We're going to do the whole episode. The whole episode's just going to be this. And that was sort of the first time in my career where someone had said, you can do something really out the box if you've got the goods. And he was basically saying to me, I just watched it. We have the goods. We're going to figure this out. And we're just going to we're going to edit a whole 25-minute episode just about this. And we're going to throw out everything else that we have planned for Monday. And on Monday morning, like we come in, and I'm in DC and they're in New York, and we make this plan to basically edit 2 parallel episodes. We're a little worried we can't actually get the 25-minute just Charlottesville episode done at 9 a.m. that morning, just because there was so much footage and there's so much that had happened, and it was like, how do we handle this?
By way of timeline, when did Heather Heyer die? In that weekend?
Saturday.
Okay.
Saturday afternoon.
That was already, okay.
So Saturday afternoon, all that stuff goes down. Saturday night, my correspondent, Ellie Reeve, who's amazing, and then one of our producers, Tracy Jarrett, who's also amazing. I don't even want to say his name, but the white supremacist had kind of fled Virginia and gone into like North Carolina, but had invited us to his hotel room, and they did this like crazy pants interview with him about what happened. And he has all these guns on the bed. And I remember before they went in, I'm talking to Tracy on the phone, and I'm like, here's the deal. You need to stand as close to the door as possible as Ellie is interviewing him. I also talked to like the cameraman, and here's the deal. It doesn't matter. Like the story doesn't matter if you feel unsafe.
Right.
Just get the fuck out if you start to feel unsafe. And Tracy is a Black woman, and Ellie is like a very beautiful blonde woman. And if you feel uncomfortable, just leave. Like, I will support you. I will back you up. But like, let's talk through how to do this. And they come into the hotel room, and he has like guns out and everything. And Tracy, she tells me, because you can't see her on camera clearly, but she tells me she was like standing like literally with like her hand on the doorknob of the door, just in case they needed to run. But so that Saturday night, all that footage comes back in. We do more interviews on Sunday. And then on Monday, we decide to produce 2 parallel episodes. And there's actually a piece that I did, sort of like a talking to camera piece about what happened that no one will ever see, but that I had to write because we were worried we wouldn't finish the other version of the show. And the thing you can't do is have 30 minutes of black on HBO. That's just not a thing that flies.
Not cool. Yeah, it's not kosher.
But around 2:00 that afternoon, we had to make a decision because we basically needed all of the editing power we possibly could have to get the episode done. And we had to abandon the second version of the episode for that day. And so basically my boss was like, screw it, we're taking the gamble. We were editing until the last possible minute in the control room. We made it at 7:30 and aired that piece. But I had never been in a situation where like everything was thrown out because this was more important, and that we knew we could show people something and make them think and feel something. And it has totally changed my view of news because I worked for Josh and I worked for Vice. Yeah.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like very, I'm having like flashbacks to Newsroom, you know?
Yeah. Well, okay, no, that show's terrible.
Oh, you hate that show? Oh my God,
I hate that show. I mean, I love Aaron Sorkin. I've watched every episode of Sports Night. I've watched every episode of West Wing. I've even watched every episode of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. Mm-hmm. Newsroom. The problem for me is, I think this is the problem for like lawyers who watch Law and Order, is that I am too close to how it actually works to suspend disbelief to buy into these characters. Mm-hmm. And so on that show, it was one of those things of, one, like their interpersonal shit was too like open and messy.
Yeah.
Like, is there interpersonal shit in newsrooms? There absolutely is.
Right.
But is it that open and messy? No, because that's not how the real world works. Yeah. So that's number one. And in the very first episode of Newsroom, which was what turned me off of the show, because I was there, I was excited. It's Aaron fucking Sorkin.
Right.
I believe like either the first or the second episode is basically kind of cribbing off the BP oil spill.
Yeah, totally.
And they have a producer who is like looking on some like Reddit chat room or something, like, oh, I'm seeing this stuff about how BP, like, or fake oil company is lying about this, and like it's actually like still going and blah blah blah. And like I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I was like, I covered the BP oil spill. I was in Houston for 6 weeks. I was in New Orleans for 3 weeks. No one knew what the fuck was happening or how to fix it. Like BP did not know anything. No one knew anything. It was a like slow process of figuring out how bad was it. Oh, the earth is still bleeding. Oh, okay, how do we fix this? How is this going to work? It was a process. And this idea that like some kid is sitting and like reading a Reddit thing that suddenly explained all of it, I was just like, that's not how this shit works. And so then I was turned off. Yeah.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Nice. Awesome. So that's really cool. Nice. So now I totally need to have you on my show again because you're awesome and I miss your face. And
yes. Like, how is your tapenade though?
It's tapenade like.
Have you tasted it? Like, where are we?
I should taste it. That is a thing I should have.
You should taste it.
Yeah. I don't want to like mess up camera. By the way, I'm totally in Charlottesville right now. Did I mention that?
Oh, you are? Is that where your family is?
My brother is a professor at UVA. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Baby
it
brother.
Is a lovely town.
Oh, it's
minus the racism part.
I missed, so there was a time after all of the stuff went down in Charlottesville, before the conclusion with the statue was that they had to keep it up or whatever.
Yeah.
Where there was it was so fantastic. The statue was awesome for a while because it was just this giant black trash bag
that they had put over it.
I was like, I like that statue.
It's good. It's very pretty.
And I like it. I like it. Like enormous. Like it couldn't have even been a trash bag because they don't make them that big. It was like.
Well, what do you think about the statue thing? Do you think these statues should come down, or is there like a historical reason to actually leave them up?
I think it depends on the context. I do generally agree with Robert E. Lee's family, which is this needs to be within context in a museum.
Yeah.
Like doesn't need to be everywhere. And also, I mean, I think, when you look at when did these things actually go up, as you know, it was not at the end of the Civil War. It was not during the Civil War. It was like when people were feeling super racist. And so like, no, like that's not. But, I think there are cases like they're taking down speakers of the House in Congress, right? Did I hear this correctly?
That I haven't seen.
That was a second. Then if you haven't heard it, then I was probably misunderstanding it. I do think if there are like, if it is, all of the speakers of the House and they have all of the portraits. Yeah. Like taking down like 2 of them just because, and I think, I also think that
like I don't think George Washington's portrait should be removed from the White House.
I support that. That. Well, I mean, whatever, it's fine. I think that it is really important to be honest about who people were and who they weren't. Yeah. And lionizing everyone just because they did a thing is rough and not necessary. But I also think that it's a mistake to write people off completely because they weren't perfect and because they succumbed to certain pressures of the time. Yeah. It was wrong, absolutely. But like, I mean, people.
But Jefferson owned slaves.
Pot.
People owned slaves.
Right.
I don't mean to shrug. Like there are issues with that, but also Jefferson helped write the Declaration of Independence. Like,
right. Yeah, I mean, it's like a little bit like Bill Clinton, right? Like, was he a good president?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no.
Yes, in some ways, no. But like, is he a bad president because he got a blowjob? I don't think so.
No, he's not a bad president because he got a blowjob. He is a questionable human being because he took advantage of an intern.
Absolutely.
And I do think, and I think this is what you're getting at, is that context matters. And I think there's a lot of stuff, especially with someone like Bill Clinton, that the Democratic Party is like, oh, we're cool with Clinton, and that's fine. He took advantage of an intern.
Which is, and frankly, like, I think the bigger issue is he didn't just take advantage of an intern, right? Like, yeah. So, like, to what extent are we okay with having sexual predators in our midst? That's a big problem. That is not okay. But like, does it nullify everything else that he did? I don't think so. I think that I just feel like we should be adult enough to be able to recognize that, like, people do bad things and like the things are bad, but it doesn't negate everything else that they did.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's a hard conversation, but that is part of the conversation we need to have right now.
Yeah. I mean, I also just think that, like, God help us if that's the criteria we're going to be judged by, right? Like if 300 years down the line, they're like, oh, well, if you ever wore a dress, you are Satan.
Like, you're like, shit. Okay, great.
Exactly. Like,
okay, taste your tapenade.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I need to taste this. No, I should let you go because you're like a person working.
I feel like there's a couple of emails I've missed.
And I really, really appreciate you coming on. Let's see. Where is your crackers? I'll taste this and then I will let you go, and then I'll just have to have you back on and, also have you over for dinner when, the world reopens.
Good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Success.
Yes. So, anyway,
thank you. This has been fun. I love memory laning about my
it
time
was
in
so
the Obama
fantastic.
White House.
This is really fantastic and awesome. And well, I'll have to have you on again. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, if you like what you're seeing here on Quintersectional Conversations, I am a person with rent. Feel free to PayPal your support to quintersectional@gmail.com. And check us out again on new episodes. And check Shawna Thomas out. She is at Quibi, which is a new fabulous app that we didn't get time to talk about, but you should download it and check out all the cool content that they have.
Lots of news on the app.
Lots of news. And also check out Shawna on Vice, because I assume your episodes are still posted on HBO, right?
Yeah, you can definitely find my episodes or like my pieces on YouTube, and I'm at Twitter at Shawna, SHAWNA.
Awesome. And I'll post those in the comments and things. All right.
Well, thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.